dear brothers and sisters, unfortunately, one of the problems of modern science, and this is a problem, is that modern science, unfortunately, has caused many of us to lose the awe that we should have when it comes to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact of the matter is that even if we know there's going to be an eclipse, and even if we have 100,000 pictures, and even if we can see it on YouTube and on our iPhones, and we know exactly when it will begin and end, this does not take away from the majesty, from the beauty, from the splendor, from the absolute amazement of this creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, the sun and the moon are of the most miraculous creations of Allah. وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ, Allah says, the sun and the moon have been placed in order. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ اللَّيْلُ وَالنَّهَارُ وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. Of His miracles is the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, to think about it, it is mind-boggling. These massive objects, this ball of fire and gas and helium hurtling through space at tens of thousands of kilometers an hour, tens of thousands, and it is going on its own axis, and around it are going so many planets, and around the planets are going so many moons, and yet their coordination is so precise that we do not time the eclipses. We do not time the sun and the moon. Time comes from the movement of the sun and the moon. Think about it. Our time comes from the precision of the movements of the sun and the moon. Where do we get the 24 hours? Where do we get the day? Where do we get the night? Where do we get our seconds? Our time is based upon the precision of these massive objects hurtling through space. And that's what Allah says, وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ. The sun and the moon, they are in a precise orbit. كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يسبحون لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار. The sun is not going to overtake the moon, nor will the day come before the night. Each one is in its own orbit. Who has the power to control these magnificent, huge creations? Who has the power to coordinate these structures such that we know exactly the timing of them, and we extract our day and our month and our year from the precision of their movements? Wallahi, that is indeed Al-Khaliq, Al-Alim, Al-Qadir, ala kulli shay'in qadir. These creations around us, they should bring us in awe. How insignificant we are, how puny we are in comparison to the creation.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Wherever you are, whenever you are, whoever you are, comrades and fellow travelers and casual observers and all that. I hope you have enjoyed your week leading up. I hope none of you have had any terrible crises. I see, as you can see, I'm here alone again. Abby's still sick. I guess she had thought that maybe there was just food poisoning going on, but apparently, excuse me, apparently she's still under the weather. So wishing her the best. Hopefully she makes a smooth recovery. Thoughts in your prayers if you're a prayer. So today is going to be a little bit of hopefully an interesting stream. I wanted to talk about the potential correlation or seemingly significant correlation between economic recession and solar activity, the solar cycle and the business cycle specifically. So it's a little bit one of those things that people turn their nose up at, consider conspiracy theory, pseudoscience, entertaining but not real. I would suggest that maybe there's if a rich person's discovered a secret to something as far as how to understand the stock market and the way that it was set up in the first place, would they want the general public to know, or would they encourage the general public to believe that that's just a folk tale or whatever? So I wanted to let's jump into it here, because I think maybe I had a lot to cover this week. I felt like last week's stream was a bit sloppy and unprofessional, too many technical errors. I have looked at into my computer issues, and I feel like I maybe fixed them. So hopefully we don't have the same problems we do last time. So the stream being smoother for you guys, not so glitchy. Welcome, stay balanced, Rhonda Ellsworth, Myra Page. Thank you for being here. Just let me know if the stream's a little bit glitchy or anything, okay, guys? So I came across this this research a little bit while ago, and I've had a little bit of a hobby interest in it for a while now. So I feel like it's maybe time to share this, considering this eclipse coming up and everything. There's and the beginning of the solar maximum and the solar cycle 25, and all of these things happening this year is quite rare and very interesting and relevant, considering it does have more of an effect on things like war and famine and recession, as ridiculous as that sounds, you know. Little funny thing to keep in mind is the word disaster does actually have its origin in the stars there, where previous the superstition was that disasters here on Earth had their origins written in the stars and stuff like that. And there's a little bit more truth to that than we would maybe like to admit. So, do sunspots explain global recession, war, or famine? Maybe it's something about the number 11. This was from November 13th, 2020. Okay. William Henry Jevons was one of the forgotten fathers of modern economics and, in a way, of astronomy. A brilliant statistician and philosopher, Jevons, who lived in Victoria, England, pioneered early theories of resource depletion and macroeconomics. In the late 1870s, Jevons amassed a wealth of data suggesting a connection between a decline in sunspots, of all things, and an increase in crop failures leading to a market downturn. Jevons traced this correlation back to the infamous South Sea Bubble of 1720, the first major financial crash of a modern stock market. So one thing I find in particular of interest as Marxist is that Jevons was something of a contemporary of Marx. He is like the father of neoclassical economics, you might say. So his opinions on economics, he is definitely an intelligent and like he's a good intellectual opponent of Marx, you might say, because he's not like modern economists these days are a little bit of a joke. And I would say that some of his theories have borne a lot of fruition for the modern world. There are things like the you might call the marginal utility of value. That comes from William Jevons, and he has this theory is a bit of in opposition to the labor theory of value. So I think it's important for us to discuss this and have our Marxist critique and of his work, and to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's certainly some things that come from his work that are important. One thing maybe I'll show you here is called the diamond water paradox. In the case of water and diamonds, most consumers have abundant access to water, so the value of an additional unit of water is negligible because of the large supply they already have. The marginal utility of water would be close to zero. Diamonds are a very rare possession for most, so an additional unit of diamonds is for. Well, I guess that's just one slide among many, but I just found this on the internet for the graph, right? So the water and diamonds paradox, if you never heard of it, is this strange thing. How do we explain economically why do people value diamonds more than water? And it has to do with this. The resolution of that paradox is this marginal utility theory. But this doesn't explain everything clearly. There's some fallacy to this somehow, but it seems quite logically strong. So I think that they're not really a perfect fit where you be able to synthesize necessarily Jevons and Marx, but that's the kind of the whole dialectical material method is to make use of your economic opponents' theories to further your own, right? So So let's see what you guys are saying over here. Marx is not an easy read. Kudos to anyone who's able to parse through it. Yeah, I still have a lot to read. I've read some. I lost the book I was reading. I got 60% through a 1,000-page book, but it is dense. It is not. It's dry reading. It's not so simple. But for those who can make it through it, there's a lot of value there. So I also feel that, not to be too much of an orthodox Marxist, there's room for critique of the labor theory of value. It doesn't necessarily explain everything. So we're going to have to kind of have a combination of these theories to progress forward if we really want to put an end to capitalism. So yeah, Midwestern Marx has really helped. But yeah, Marx is very dense. Yeah, so if you're looking for someone to help you understand that, I've come to rely on them too. So let's get back to what I was reading here. So in the 1880s, sunspots' effects on Earth were one of the leading areas of research in astronomy and in the emerging field of climate studies. Science magazine encouraged statisticians across scientific fields to compare sunspot data with temperature, pressure, magnetic disturbances, and rainfall, as well as financial crises and epidemic diseases. Many ordinary people delighted in this research, leading some contemporary observers to contemptuously scoff at the fad of sunspottery. The types of questions Jevons raised about the economic knock-on effects of solar activity continued to consume great economic minds like A.C. Pijou and William Beveridge well into the 20th century. The Harvard sociologist Pitirim Sorokin considered the links between sunspots and the origins of wars. John Maynard Keynes, on the other hand, labeled the infectious debate over Jevons' idea the sunspot virus. So you see how opposing economic fields of philosophies of thought will slander or dismiss and deride other people's ideas, especially with this idea that it's a mental virus. We hear a lot of that these days, right? Like, these people are suffering from this mental virus of QAnon, whatever, kind of, so that language persists. In 2011, the UK added extreme space weather events to its national risk assessment alongside terrorism, global warming, and pandemics. So as much as people will go around dismissing people who talk about this stuff as lunatics and weirdos, I think that this sort of little data point demonstrates that we should be talking about solar cycles and solar activity and its effects on our climate and our economics about as often as we are worried about and discuss terrorism, global warming, and pandemics, in case anyone else disagrees with that. That's my opinion. In October 2016, President Obama signed Executive Order 13744, which ties solar forecasting to the nation's security. So while uneducated people are dismissing this topic as a fad or a virus or whatever, a thought virus, there's powerful people making powerful decisions about it behind the scenes or right under your nose. So this is Executive Order 13744, aims to improve capabilities to predict and detect space weather events, establish plans to alert both the public and private sectors of impending events, reduce risks to critical infrastructure through mitigation plans, coordinate abilities to respond to and recover from space weather events. The agencies identified in this order shall seek, and here's a key word I hope you guys have learned to recognize the same way I do, public-private and international collaborations to enhance observation networks, conduct research, develop prediction models and mitigation approaches, enhance community resilience and preparedness, and supply the services necessary to protect life and property and promote economic prosperity as consistent with law. So the trigger word I have here is public-private for me, because I've found that public-private has come to become synonymous with. I meant to share this tab instead. So as you can see, there it is. Now I was talking about. I just read this, right? So I'm saying this trigger word here is public-private, right here. and it seems to become a euphemism for me to fascism, the way that it's been applied. So that's just something that stuck out to me. Anyways, getting back to what I was doing. Yeah, that's the end of that one. So I'll move on to the next one. I just wanted to kind of share this one here quickly to show you kind of what got me down this rabbit hole to begin with. Right, I saw this article, and I read this here. Canadian market participants expect the Bank of Canada to start cutting its key policy rate from a 22-year high of 5% in April 2024. And so this 22-year high number right there struck me as funnily, coincidentally, the same number as the 11-year solar cycle. It's actually a 22-year cycle. I think it's called the Gliesberg cycle or something like that, or the Hale cycle. And every 22 years, it flips back to its starting point and begins again. So I feel like these kinds of things, they'll deny that there's a correlation between the two, but I think that these interest rate hikes that they've been talking about in the media a lot, what are they going to do? Are they going to hold the rates or whatever? Are they going to raise them? Is it going to cause a recession or whatever? I think those interest rates are completely tied to this solar cycle, and I'll show you my evidence, right? And so that will help you predict what they're going to do, whether they like it or not, because the interest rate, if the solar cycle is going down, the interest rate will go down unless they want to decouple their economics from this cycle, and I don't think they do. So if you want to understand how the powerful people are ignoring all our complaints about the economy, whatever, it's got to do with this kind of stuff, as silly as it sounds, whether it's grounded in reality or not. So policy rate from a 22-year high, a month later than the previous forecast, according to a survey released by the central bank on Monday. Survey showed a median of 27 financial participants expect interest rates to drop to 4% in the fourth quarter 2024, up from an expectation of 3.5% in the previous survey released in July. The survey was conducted from September 2028, before official data showed Canada's annual inflation rate unexpectedly slowed to 3.8%. So I'm very much skeptical of their numbers to begin with, but for this particular session, I'm going to explore what happens when you take their word for it at face value and compare those numbers with the cycle that I'm talking about. So slowed to 3.8 in September, and the economy likely slipped into a shallow recession in the third quarter. A median of market participants expect inflation to drop to 2.2% by end 2024, and the gross domestic product to grow 1.2% in 2024 versus a year earlier, both unchanged from the previous survey. So the debate about a recession, I would say the caveat is that while some parts of the economy would be in recession, there will be others that might be in like maybe in like a bull market, such as I'll get to it later on, the nuclear market, like the uranium market and stuff, that seems to be poised to be in a bull market. So that seems to be contradictory to recession. So when we're hearing people say the economy is fine, whatever, they're probably biased by which part of the economy they're observing and why. So let's see what you guys are talking about before I move on here. Say solar cycle is dependent upon magnetic field flipping. No, I say yes. That's exactly what it is. And then it's not exactly a strict, like 11 years on the dot kind of thing. It does vary for very scientific reasons, but it is more or less for the past like a couple centuries. It's been fairly regular enough to be statistically significant and all that stuff, whatever. So, and of course, people dismiss the sun, but it's without it there is no life, right? Like you can't look directly at it without it blinding you. So clearly, it has a significant effect, right? And then the global warming, is the part that makes this discussion difficult, because without all that going on, we will much clearly observe the effects without the distortion of our effect on the climate. And then climate denialists kind of want to seize this topic as a way to further denialism of the CO2 problem. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep the CO2 enthusiasts, you might say, from getting carried away and forgetting about doing the proper research, because all the money kind of goes towards CO2 research. And then if you don't have a proper balance of funding of other fields of research, you might overestimate the effect on the climate of one thing and underestimate the effect of another factor, such as solar forcing. So there was one thing I was reading about volcanic activity was saying that the effect of smaller, less spectacular eruptions have not really been factored in as much, because they weren't considered to be capable of having such an effect, which was naive and arrogant, I would say. But they discovered that they were overestimating the cooling effect that it had by potentially 50%, which is a lot. So, and who knows how much more they might know about what they're wrong about. So, but regardless of the climate change, the effect of the solar cycle on CO2 and the climate change, this correlation between recessions and solar activity, I think, is fairly robust, to the point where we need to work on convincing people to stop dismissing it as a red herring or something. So let me just see what John H. is saying here. My skepticism for climate change has increased since this whole pandemic happened. Knowing how much they lie makes me question climate change, which is exactly what happened to me. Okay, I was pretty much looked enough into the climate change stuff to feel convinced that we were really in for a dire need to change, to the point where I went making changes to the personal way I live, like get rid of my car and ride a bike when I have like kids and a family and stuff, and that makes my life a lot harder. But I thought, because of the data or whatever, would convince me that it was necessary. And then now, a few years later, I'm feeling like I'm not really sure, right? I do know that the CO2 is definitely a problem with the global warming and stuff, but there's so many other things to be concerned about, like our increasing ability for geoengineering to manipulate weather, that will make those forecasts a little bit hard to stick to, because the future is a little too hard to predict. So let's not get too lost on a tangent here. So let's cover this here. So, can solar activity influence the occurrence of economic recessions? This paper revisits evidence of solar activity influence on the economy. We examine whether economic recessions occur more often in the years around and after solar maximums. This research strand dates back to late 19th century writings of famous British economist William Stanley Jevons, who claimed that commercial crises occur with periodicity matching solar cycle length. Quite surprisingly, our results suggest that the hypothesis linking solar maximums and recessions is well anchored in data and cannot be easily rejected. Ooh, scary Russian authors, Mikhail Gorbachev. Yeah. So, this paper reviews empirical evidence of the apparent link between cycle maximums of solar activity and economic crises. An old theory outlined by famous British economist William Stanley Jevons in the 1870s claimed that commercial crises occur with periodicity broadly matching the solar cycle length of about 11 years. It is common knowledge that this beautiful coincidence, claimed by Jevons, and its theoretical explanation linking the commercial crises to bad harvests, did not stand the test and were rejected by subsequent studies. We could not find any publications in reputed economic journals in the last 80 years testing the core proposition of Jevons' theory, namely that there is a link between cyclical maximums of solar activity and economic crises. Our results suggest that economic recessions in the US and other advanced economies do occur more frequently in the years around and after the solar maximums. These results are broadly consistent with the hypothesis advanced by Jevons more than 100 years ago with regard to commercial crises. Since the beginning of the 20th century, for more than 100 years, each of the 10 cyclical maximums of solar activity overlapped closely with the recession in the US economy. This relation became even more apparent from the mid-1930s on, when 8 out of 13 recessions identified by the National Bureau of Economic Research began in the 2 years around and after the solar maximums. On a global scale, over the last 50 years, from 1965, when consistent recession dating is available for all G7 countries, nearly 3/5 of these recessions started during the 3 years around and after sunspot maximums. Looking back at the 19th century, out of 12 years that could be identified as episodes of commercial crises, 6 were within 3 years around sunspot maximum. Was it a mere coincidence or part of a broader pattern? To verify robustness of these empirical observations, we ran statistical tests. We estimated the probability of so many US recessions starting in the narrow period around sunspot maximums. And we checked the statistical significance of correlations of time series characterizing the occurrence of economic crises and the series of sunspot numbers reflecting intensity of solar activity. Our tests suggest the hypothesis of the more frequent occurrence of economic crises around the periods of maximum solar activity cannot be rejected. At the same time, our results do not shed much light on the exact factors of solar influence that could trigger these events, nor reveal the channels of their propagation. So it's a little bit mysterious. So I don't want to just kind of read this whole thing, because there's a lot, like, it would be a little bit easier to maybe cover a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to skip down to some graphs down here. Where are you? See, if I read all this, I'd be all this show would be just dedicated to this one paper, which maybe is worth doing, right? But yeah, okay. So these graphs are good to look at. I'll just kind of cover them briefly. If you wanted to pause and look at them later, you can do so. But I want to talk more about ones down here. This one in particular, okay? Figure number 4, selected revolutions that overlapped with solar maximums, 1785, 2014, okay? If you look here, it says Great French Revolution, revolutions in Europe, secession of 13 southern states, uprising in Paris, Russian Empire, February Revolution, revolution in Cuba, Islamic Revolution, fall of Berlin Wall, Arab Spring, okay? Revolution in Ukraine. Look at them. I think this is a little bit of a too much of a coincidence to dismiss as mere coincidence, okay? This is every single one of those plotted at the peak, okay? So I thought that's worth showing you guys and see what you have to say about that. So let me just take a quick look over here. 112 watching. Glad to see you guys have some interest in this. However, please like and share and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Let's see. Desert Mantis, I'm a climate change believer and I wholeheartedly believe in human CO2 as the major contributor. I agree. That is a general statement, is completely true. But the devil's in the details, is it not? So, yes, climate changes constantly, and this is part of the thing where this was the part of the climate change, and actually part of this climate change is very much a factor in what kicked off this industrial revolution and all this pollution, really. So it's very interesting to see how the solar activity generating our industrial creative capacities kind of wax and wane with these cycles, and then the certain one in the early 1700s kind of kick-started this anthropogenic change, and it does fit within the cycles to a degree. So the U.S. inserted language in the Kyoto Protocol that prohibit tied, including military emissions. agree the messaging is bad. The public-private partnership wants to push the burden of reducing CO2 on civilians rather than industrial and military activities. And yeah, and we will see how that strategy in and of itself is a bit of a thing that needs to be put to a stop as much as like as soon as possible, because it's a doomed strategy that will kind of it will prevent us from acting in the time window that we have to do something about it, and it will give them the excuse to continue their activities and blame it on us and prevent us from being able to save our families and stuff, because we'll be the scapegoats. So yeah, 800 bases being a good example of poisoning of their fresh water. I've got a segment talking, and we're going to get into the nuclear war potential and uranium mining. We'll see how this marginal utility, this is why I wanted to kind of go in this direction, was the marginal utility of nuclear weapons is some of this logic that they're using, where at the beginning, a couple nuclear weapons had a marginal utility that was reasonable, where the deterrent effect was worth the potential crisis and damage that would ensue from unleashing them. But that theory, the marginal utility of value, has been kind of debunked by nuclear weapons themselves, because the proliferation of them, the number of them out there, being a extinction level event if it ever happens, and all of the unpredictable things making it impossible to prevent how likely is it of occurring, make it so that the simplest kind of formula is that 0 nuclear weapons equals 0 chance of nuclear war, and X number of weapons equals X chance of war. So it's like, anyway, I'm getting distracted here. Let's see. Is there an estimated year for the next revolution then? This is kind of why I wanted to go in this direction, because if this is part of a factor in when a revolution is successful or not, the reason why there are maybe no stars down in the valleys is because the revolutions attempted outside of this cycle may have less of a chance of succeeding. Not that it would be impossible, but it's like surfing on a wave on the ocean. Like, if you ride the closer to the crest, you have a better chance of not falling, and if you don't time it right, you just can't do it. It's just kind of like this constraint to our free will that we're trying to understand, that Engels talks about and stuff. So if this is one of the constraints and we're not understanding it, it will be one of the things that our ignorance prevents us from understanding what causes our failure. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. So also, while you bring that up, I'm kind of glad you mentioned that. I'll pivot a little bit slightly to this topic over here. UAW tells other unions to align contracts to set up possible national general strike in 2028. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. If this theory bears weight, then is this recommendation from such a character as Sean Fain something that is supported by this data, that we should wait because the solar cycle suggests that we would have a better chance at that point? Or are we going to recognize that maybe he's betrayed us and he intends to continue to betray us? And if we take this advice and we wait until we're in the wrong, into the valley of the cycle instead of the peak, then we will take the advice that will prevent us from succeeding. So I don't think we should listen to him, is my humble advice, although 4 years is plenty of time to do enough research to understand what kind of things can be done in 2028. So I would like to share on this topic the World Socialist website article that came out just a few days ago on the Easter Monday there. Financial assets of UAW rose in 2023 as bureaucracy pushed through sellout contracts. The 2023 financial report filed by the United Auto Workers with the U.S. Department of Labor shows the union bureaucracy's net assets rose by $87.6 million to $1.133 billion in 2023, despite a fall in membership, and the costs of the supposedly historic strike against the big three automakers. should be remembered that Sean Fain and the Democratic Socialists of America advisors on his staff claimed that calling out 150,000 GM, Ford, and Stellantis workers last year, as rank-and-file workers demanded, would quickly bankrupt the union. Instead, he called a phony stand-up strike or non-strike, which never involved more than a quarter of the membership. While the stand-up strike did nothing to impact the bottom line of the auto companies, it did preserve the bottom line of the UAW, having even less impact on UAW finances than the 40-day 2019 GM strike. The official financial report undoubtedly understates the true wealth controlled by the UAW apparatus, since the hundreds of millions of dollars in the strike fund are listed at their book value and does not take into account the significant appreciation in value of the underlying investments. The appreciation in value, which is tied to the stock market, which is tied to the solar cycles, is all I'm saying, just a little bit. Cough, cough. In addition to the listed assets, the UAW controls and manages a multi-billion-dollar retiree benefit trust fund, or VEBA. The net value of the VEBA was $65.57 billion at the end of 2021 and paid out hundreds of millions in expenses, a large portion unitemized. Although 12 top officers are paid in excess of the $200,000 and hundreds more earn six figures, putting them in the top 5% of U.S. income earners, it would be better to call this business entity UAW Inc. An examination of its income expenses shows the UAW apparatus received more money from income from sale of investments and interest than from dues. So if you want to read that article properly, I highly recommend it. While the World Socialist website are run by Trotskyists, and I don't really agree with them on their theories of revolution in every way, I feel like what we need to do is reconcile Stalinism and Trotskyism, bury the hatchet, unite all forces available for this general strike, and ignore the UAW saying to do it in 4 years. And I think now is the time. I think the solar cycle and all that stuff suggests that 2024 is the year, kind of thing, 2025. So just for food for thought. So yes, Sean showed his true colors in the end. Yes. So he is not for the working class. Sell out, Sean. That's right. So be warned, right? Anyways, another thing that I wanted to show in relation with that 2028 UAW thing was this Motley Fool financial website. It says the stock market indicator. This stock market indicator has been 100% accurate since 1957. It signals a big move in the S&P 500 in 2024. This is from February 14th. The S&P 500 bull market became official when the index reached a new record high in January 2024. The current bull market aligns with the historical average. The S&P 500 will rise 21% by October 2024, and it will compound at 25% annually through February 2028. The S&P 500 returned 10.2% annually over the last 3 decades. So the reason why I tried to reconcile this and understand why is there a signal that's 100% accurate since 1957 suggesting a bull market when all these other indicators are suggesting a recession. And this is where we come into if anyone remembers this thing about a K-shaped recovery. So this is, I think, something to keep in mind with that. So we've got a bull market indicator because of the threat of nuclear war. In the uranium mining market kind of thing, and then all these other financial indicators, there's likely going to be a recession, right? So for nuclear power, if that gets a bull market, then like the oil and gas market might be where the money's coming from. So there will be a recession in that market kind of thing, or the renewables market kind of thing. They're all kind of correlated in, well, when one moves, the other does too, and all that. So speaking of nuclear, let's get into this here. Let's see what you guys got. Anything going on? Yeah, I agree that we need to unite. Thank you. Right? It's time to put some petty stuff behind because while we got these opportunities, because I think, when we look back after we've united and successfully dispatched these ridiculous people causing all these problems, I think it will be very easy to solve those problems that we squabble about now, considering how we will have put them aside and by doing so, benefited by doing so, and then the empirical evidence will speak for itself. So I'm just going to kind of motor on through here. The economic impact of nuclear weapons, destruction, cost, and diversion. So I may have lost. Okay, here we go. There's so much here to read, so I'm going to do my typical thing and breeze on through it and just kind of cafeteria style, pick and choose what to share with you to try and paint a little picture for you. So, because what I wanted to, I should change my little banners here. Playing Matador with nuclear war, because that's what it seems like we're doing. Actually, before I go with this, I should preface with this one. Sorry, I got them out of order. I didn't realize. So let me just take a look here. Yeah. So a financial research firm, this is from 2022, just after the war broke out. A financial research firm says there is a 10% chance of nuclear apocalypse this year and recommends investors stay bullish on stocks even as the threat looms. So that's like the detachment of reality has a real effect in the economy because the investors, regardless of their detachment from reality, they still have a lot of power over reality with what they do with their crazy beliefs. So the chances of a civilization-ending nuclear event soared after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but that doesn't mean investors should stop buying stocks. Instead, investors should remain bullish on stocks over the next 12 months, despite the increased risk for a nuclear event. So the risk of Armageddon has risen dramatically. Stay bullish, right? This is from 2022. They said for 12 months you should stay bullish. So what does that mean? Or 12 months later, you think their recommendation is to stop being bullish? When is a bear market going to come? Because when you look into it, I find that their recommendation to this day is to remain bullish. I think in 2023, this time of year, March 8th, their recommendation was stay bullish. I think this time of year, May 8th, 2024, their recommendation, stay bullish. Okay, you get the picture? Because financial risks mean nothing in the face of existential risk. Okay, this is the risk of nuclear apocalypse does not mean investors should sell their stocks and head for the hills. Instead, they should buy. And why? What is the logic to that decision? It's a fallacious logic, but it's something that they employ anyways. And you'd see the majority of the market thinks this way, regardless of the fact that it's a fallacy. Okay, if ICBM is heading your way, the size and composition of your portfolio become irrelevant. So that thinking echoes an experienced market veteran Art Cashin had when he was working on Wall Street during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Rumors had hit Wall Street that Russia launched missiles headed towards the U.S. Cashin attempted to sell stocks as the Dow Jones took a dive, but Cashin's mentor stepped in and said, "Look, kid, if you hear the missiles are flying, you buy them. You don't sell them, because if you're wrong, the trade will never clear. We'll all be dead." Okay? But it's important for everyone to recognize that while people made a killing because they managed to not all be dead that particular time, this logic has led us down this crazy, this path of playing Matador with nuclear weapons. And while you maybe didn't get gored by the bull last time, if you get bowled by it once, it's over. And it's not this metaphor applies not to a single person, but to humanity itself. Okay, so I think it's important that we wake up and we sober up and when it comes to nuclear war, and the leaders in charge or whatever be dispatched from being in charge or whatever, they be taken out of power if they are not going to put an end to the conflicts that are going on right now as soon as possible. And that means as soon as possible because the threat of nuclear war is at play. So if you don't, you're not to be trusted in a sense, right? So let's see. I am glad to see African states like Niger and now Senegal telling the colonial states to leave. Yes, this is part of, I feel like, these cycles. there's long-term cycles, not just short ones. There's like this like 60-year cycles and stuff, and colonialism is kind of, and slavery also. If you go looking for spectacular associations with those, you'd be finding them. Whether or not they're coincidence is hard to say, because this is strange, weird research. It's not straightforward science. But their revolutions are kicking off right in time with the solar cycle. They have a lot of religion, a lot of the Abrahamic religions and stuff, Chinese, not Chinese, Christian and Jewish and Islam. I feel like they know they're part of the reason why the economy is geared around this, is because they're solar religions. They have lunisolar calendars. Okay, that's what it's all about. But then they distance themselves from that. They say it's not superstition. We're not astrologers or whatever, because they kind of, con man wants to run his con. You know what I mean? I wonder if we missed our chance at a general strike then, John H. says. I think some people would say yes, we obviously did. Now I'm curious about tracking that solar thing. I would say it's not too late. I would say we kind of, it's important not to move too fast. So we gotta sort of wait for whatever, for the roller coaster to tip and start to scream on its way down, and that might be the time to go. Or you might gotta wait for when we hit to the bottom, or you might want to go right at the peak. I'm not quite sure. I'm not the strategist, whatever, the right person to suggest when is the best timing. But I am saying that we do have to maybe try and figure that out. Because I think that between April and October this year, if there's a general strike, that would be, if someone would analyze if it would be strategically useful, then I think we should do it in that time window. Even though it seems like we don't have the resources, how are we going to? We have to take a chance. That's the whole thing about it. A revolution, like you're going to have to gamble a little bit. You're going to have to say, if we do this and it pays off, we have the resources. If we don't do this and it doesn't pay off, we didn't have the resources. Like, you have to make those kinds of hard calls, right? I follow the 17-year cycle of the periodic cicadas, not the solar cycle. Nice. Yeah. That reminds me of the Metonic cycle, the 18 or 19-year lunar cycle. That one's an interesting one to talk about too. So yeah, we are in a settler colonial occupation. Yes. And this is where I'm saying it seems like all of that is coming to an end, and that's not just that's like a century long kind of cycle, and that's one of those things. Am I going to see it in my lifetime? I think so, potentially, or it'll go the other way, and it'll be like another century of colonialism, which is why it's like superposition in quantum mechanics. Like, don't take what I'm saying as prophecy, obviously, because it's the interesting thing about human will. Like, nothing is decided until it's over. So anyway, so that one was done. Let's go to here. Are investors prepared for Czech's notes nuclear war in space? Space boom meet actual boom. This is February 23rd, 2024. Imagine if a country launched a 1.4 megaton nuclear warhead into space and detonated it 400 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean, generating such a huge burst of electromagnetic energy that it resulted in an artificial aurora while disrupting electrical systems over land masses up to 1,500 kilometers away and destroying several satellites. Excuse me. This actually happened in 1962, and the actor naturally was the United States of America. Early 1960s, the United States conducted a series of nuclear tests in space, which were primarily aimed at studying the effects and potential military applications of deploying nuclear weapons in space. Explosion test was called Starfish Prime. Finance and Economics 101 tells us that a robust legal framework to protect property rights is one of the reasons lower risk investors prefer investing in the United States and other developed economies over emerging markets. So that's a Financial Times for you. Just kind of bald-faced, lying in your face about how obvious basic economics 101 tells us that property rights are the only thing that will protect proper sound economic. Okay, so these people are, I'm just kind of reading to you this because it's what they're talking about is very important. So, but in comparison to the hyper evolved regulatory frameworks of these markets, the number of laws and regulations in the jurisdiction of space is decidedly thin. Currently, there are only 5 international treaties and a handful of non-binding UN General Assembly resolutions that govern space, says Christopher Johnson, a space lawyer at the Secure World Foundation. Not 5,000, not 500, just 5. And this is a funny thing, that the way that they're spinning this, because this capitalists will, what do they say, sell water to a drowning man if they can. So it is unideal that there are currently no globally binding rules that protect investor interests and assets in space. Because if we had those globally binding rules that protected those investor interests, then they could have whatever interests and assets in space that they wanted, and they would be able to dominate that market, emerging market, wherever, before, anyone could do something actually honorable with that kind of thing. So consider the 180 billion valuation of SpaceX, which is largely credited to its Starlink satellite communications constellation. This constellation could disappear in the space of minutes with the use of a single nuclear anti-satellite weapon in space, Russian or otherwise. It is possible many investors have not considered that a single adversarial event could destroy value so quickly. So Mr. Billionaire Elon Musk's value seems to be quite inflated beyond belief, reasonable belief, for no apparent reason. And things like this war with Russia, I don't know why it hasn't already, should be a little prick in his ballooned ego there and valuation of his companies. But there's something about too big to fail and all that. So, but it is interesting to see how vulnerable they are. Only thing that if the Russians ever did something like this, kind of all hell would break loose. So that's sort of what the investors are banking on, I guess you would say. So the Outer Space Treaty says that nations cannot militarize space, place weapons in space, or take ownership of any celestial space bodies. This makes it an established investor's friend, not foe, especially if that investor is American. See, I don't really know why they have to be so arrogant in this when they analyze these kinds of things, because these things affect all of us, not just Americans, but Americans, investors in particular, only think about themselves. So the fact that nations cannot militarize space and take ownership of celestial bodies and stuff is a really good thing, but investors are going to make use of a law banning them from, what do you call, nationalizing industries in space, like a communist would. But by making a treaty that bars that action, we're leaving potentially this corrupt UN body the opportunity to establish a legal framework that makes it so that we have corporations in space before we have nations, like corporations with power and influence in space, more so than nations, which would not make any sense. This treaty also stipulates that nations can't appropriate celestial bodies. That is bad news for the American venture capitalists desperate to become asteroid miners, or at least it was until 2015 when the US enacted the American Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, which basically said that US citizens have the legal right to mine and sell the resources on asteroids even if nations did not. This interpretation of the Outer Space Treaty expressly disallows appropriation of resources by governments, but has allowed it by the private sector, especially in the United States, which does not follow international law, but demands that everyone else follow some kind of figment of their imagination called rules-based order. Okay, of course, circumventing the Outer Space Treaty to serve American investor interests works great until other nations decide they want to suit their own national interests. So this is the dumbest thing ever, too. They create a little precedent that is meant to benefit them, but by doing so, they establish the precedent that other nations will follow. That, namely, that a sovereign nation has the right to pursue their own interests according to their own laws. So if the Americans decide that they're allowed to privatize space and be capitalist, greedy assholes, then they will leave open the door for other nations to say, America said it was right, so I can do it too. Okay? So fuck all you assholes who are going to go around with that kind of fallacious thinking that has insanely deleterious effects on the rest of us. Okay. Perhaps it's time for investors to rethink their reliance on the Outer Space Treaty and come up with something a bit more grounded. Investors, are you kidding me? Perhaps it's time for the international community to rethink their reliance on 5 laws, on something that we're going to need a lot more serious, whatever, legal, community interest, whatever in, okay, willpower, all that. So anyway, I got a little worked up with this kind of topic because they're playing with our lives and they're just kind of a bunch of gambling addicts, and I don't like it at all. So, how are you guys doing? Do you have a link to that PDF I showed earlier? Sure, let me grab it for you here. Pop it in the chat here. Cool. Yeah, there is a lot there. I didn't even read the whole thing myself. I've just kind of been dabbling in this topic to begin with, so I'm sort of looking for like little keywords and stuff like that. But feel free to delve into it and get back to me with some critiques or whatever. It's from the Munich Personal Archive, so it sounds like it's genuinely responsible academic work. So let the whatever the critics suck on that. So let me see what else. John H. says, there are groups, Stephen Greer, trying to prevent the weaponization of space, but I'm not sure how well that's going. Yeah, it's because this topic's been relegated to the dustbin, basically. Like with everything else going on, it's really hard to get people to care about something as far away as space when they gotta like put food on the table for their kids, right? And make sure they get enough medicine for their sick grandmother and all this stuff, right? So that's how they keep us exhausted and distracted so that we can't really deal with things until it's too late. So I could link another paper here too by the same guy. Don't really have time to get into it, but it's the one I just put in a link was from 2015, and this other one's from 2012. Same topic, just more supporting information. So there's that one. So feel free. Let's see where was I? So I wanted to jump into this video here to kind of put a little bit of a human face on it, because it's one thing to read an article from the Financial Times talking about profit numbers and how much that makes sense from that perspective, but let's hear from the actual people, the communities where the mining is meant to take place. So just bear with me. Crap. I've been talking and I forgot. Glad I checked in. No sound. I forgot to jump back in. I knew that was going to happen. So let me read that again. Okay. I forget where did I drop off. I probably did this whole section here. I probably read that whole thing in silence. My bad. There we go. Yeah. So I'll just read this again. Sorry. Filling nuclear power's 5 trillion holes beyond the banks. Opinion shifting in support of nuclear power. Important to take note. Nuclear energy officials arrived in Brussels this week amid a growing wave of public support for atomic power. They left humbled by the tepid reaction of bankers assessing the price tag of their ambitions. So even the bankers themselves are the ones blowing the whistle this time. I think that's very important to take note of. The International Atomic Energy Agency convened a summit to build momentum for a low emissions technology that many expect will be critical for hitting climate targets. A group of mostly Western countries pledged to triple nuclear generation by 2050. So it seems like only the Western countries are the ones betting on this. Seems like a bad bet. But lenders balked at the eye-watering cost of doing so. If the bankers are uniformly pessimistic, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, former U.S. Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz said Thursday after listening to a panel of international lenders explain why they're unwilling to provide the $5 trillion the industry needs by mid-century. Pardon me. The bankers are calling for a proven business case, said Josef Sikela, the Czech Republic's industry and trade minister. We need to find a way to make it predictable, stable, bankable, and affordable. All the things that you need to be rational, I guess, in this system. Projects in Western economies have been plagued. No, I didn't want to read that. Oh, yeah, this was funny. We need state involvement. I don't see any other model. Probably we need quite heavy state involvement to make projects bankable. So that's kind of the sticking point, right? China and Russia are building the most reactors, but their state-owned model of development is at odds with the European and U.S. emphasis on private capital. That will likely need to change if Western economies want to maintain nuclear's market share. So we'll see what happens, okay? I wanted to share this other one, though, because this is what it says. Why industry experts are expecting a bull market for uranium stocks in 2024. This was January 24th this year. So uranium has started 2024 the same way it ended 2023, like a bull in a china shop. Spot prices are now agonizingly close to US $100 a pound for the first time since 2008, with term pricing not far behind. Similarly, mining.com noted the spot price of uranium continues to rise, boosted by pledges to triple nuclear power by mid-century, supply hiccups from producers such as Cameco, and the looming threat of a ban on Russian exports to the West. It continued supply and demand. A major factor behind the bullish outlook is that the demand for uranium in Western markets, excluding Russia, currently at approximately 200 million pounds, is about 40 million pounds greater than the radioactive metal supply. Furthermore, market analysts project an average supply deficit of 35 million pounds per year over the next decade. So that's where I'm saying the indications, the capitalist logic or fallacious logic dictates to them that they can expect a bull market that might be, lasting till 2028, as we discussed earlier. But who knows what's really going to happen? Because I would say the threat of nuclear war and all this stuff makes these predictions basically impossible to verify until after the fact. So, but if you're trying to understand market dynamics and how to make a decision based on that, you kind of got to try and do some of this prediction. So let me get back to this video here for the sake of time. I'm going to skip ahead here to the next interview, or skip an interview.
Paul.
Sorry about the skip ahead here again. Maybe about here. So yeah, might as well move on after that. What's the feds got it? Copyright? Uh-oh. I didn't notice anything. What are you guys talking about? End stream. Can you restart the stream? I feel like this has happened before, and you can restart the stream. YouTube didn't like that. What did they do? I still, it seems like I'm still streaming or whatever. You guys let me know what's happened. So what did they didn't let me play this video about the uranium mining. I think I can you guys hear me? Hello? Can you guys see me? Hello, hello, can you guys can you see me? Can you hear me? Hello? Anyone? Can you respond? Let me know you can hear me. Sorry about that, guys. Hopefully, not sure what happened. Am I not streaming anymore? Looks like I'm live. Stream unavailable. Crap. Wonder how the hell do I... Hello, can you hear me? Anyone see me? Hello? Am I still alive on Twitter? Anyone let me know? Hello, hello? It looks like I'm still live on Twitter, I guess. Hello? Oh, it looks like, all right. Cool. All right, I'm going to keep going here. Live on YouTube. Am I back? Okay, what the hell? Sorry, guys. Wow, I don't even know. I don't know how that even came back. I don't know what I did, or well, I know I violated watching the CBC doc, whatever. I guess it's got music in the background or something, so that you can't hear what they have to say if out loud. If you, I don't know. That's not a copyright violation. That's a censorship tactic, if you ask me. Because what was I trying to show you? I was trying to show you guys something about advocates talking about how when you speak out against the nuclear industry, you get blacklisted and blackballed and blackmailed or whatever and all that. And what happened? I couldn't even share a YouTube stream about something that the Canadian state broadcaster shared with us. So what does that tell you? It's ridiculous. It throws me off. I don't even know how to focus on where am I supposed to go next? Whatever. I gotta complete the stream here, land this plane here. I got a little bit more to show you. Hopefully nothing else happens. I don't really have any more videos, so good to know. I stepped on a landmine that time. Thank you guys for bearing with me. I still got all of you watching. Apologize to anyone watching on Twitter who could still hear me floundering all that time. I think it got banned off of YouTube, but I don't think we got interrupted on Twitter. So you guys just got to watch me be a little bit awkward for a while. So thanks for sticking with it. Let me just find my place here real quick. Okay, I think it's this one here. Okay. So I was talking earlier about this William Jevons guy, the marginal utility of value, and does the solar activity influence the occurrence of recessions here? So getting back to that a little bit, there's a little bit more. There's another guy called V.A. Belkin. He's got this article here, U.S. Federal Reserve Rate and Solar Activity, 1955 to 2022, proof of strong correlations. I'm not enough of a statistical scientist to understand a lot of this jargon, so I'm going to breeze right through it, and I'm just pointing it out to you guys, hoping that you guys don't burn me too much for not understanding what I'm talking about, but the mathematicians will be able to explain some things to you if you guys got any mathematical friends. So this report uses a methodological approach founded by W.S. Jevons and A.L. Chizevsky. The years of solar cycles were numbered according to the order established in the astrophysics of the sun, grouped and compared with the arithmetic averages of the effective rates for U.S. federal funds. Grouping statistical data by serial numbers of years of solar activity cycles made it possible to construct a function of effective rates on federal funds, dependent variable, and serial numbers of years of the average solar activity cycle, independent variable, with correlation coefficients on its 4 segments close to all of that data, whatever. This function allows you to predict the values of the effective rate on U.S. federal funds in the next years. It follows that in 2023, the rate will increase to 1.996. Now, this is wrong, I think, because the number is like higher. It's at like 5 or something. But I still think that this is worth looking at. So there's this. I'll leave this to anyone who wants. I could put this link in the chat too if anyone's interested. But let me try and find that one little. I wanted this paragraph. I think it should be emphasized that Table 2 presents data for all years for the period 1955-2022 without exception. Based on the data from the first and third columns of Table 2, a diagram is constructed, see Figure 1, which shows the relationship between the effective federal funds rate and the serial numbers of years in the solar activity cycles for the period 1955 to 2022, with the approximation coefficient R squared equal to 0.8422. Should be noted that the increase in the number of years of observation increases the value of this coefficient, whatever that means. This means that the function shown in the graph describes with high accuracy the initial data and the strong correlation between the effective federal funds rate and the serial numbers of the years of solar cycles is an astrophysical and economic fact that should be recognized by modern traditional economic science. So I just wanted to read that line out, show you this graph. That's, I guess, showing you a correlation there. I don't really know how to look at some of these graphs and determine by the X and Y axis what it's supposed to represent, about whether it's a junk fake science graph or not. But if you want to do that exercise and you come up with something that tells me this is a fake graph, I'd be happy to hear it. There's all kinds of data here I wasn't trying to get into, but there's this kind of stuff that's interesting, right? So just trying to show you how it's the U.S. Federal Reserve specifically seems to be correlated with solar activity, and everyone wants to talk about conspiracy theories about Federal Reserve, why it was set up, and who controls it and whatnot. Well, I feel like maybe this is some fuel to the fire of that conversation here. So I quickly wanted to get into this article. It seems a little bit like a strange jump from one topic to the next, but you'll understand why I did this when I get to the next slide. So 300 years since the South Sea bubble. Let me just make sure you guys can hear me and everything. Cool. Awesome. All right. 300 years since the South Sea bubble, the real story behind the iconic financial crash, August 20, 2020. Coronavirus has caused a great deal of stock market turbulence, and somewhat inevitably, comparisons have been made to the volatility caused by the South Sea bubble 300 years ago. This was the moment when, in 1720, share prices in London boomed and then fell sharply. It is thought of as a major economic disaster and huge scandal. It says in reality, scandal was not much of a disaster. I kind of gut instinct disagrees with that analysis to say, while some investors lost out from the speculation, it did not make much of a dent in the wider economy. I strongly, suspiciously disagree with this analysis, just because they always want to tell us that these massive stock market speculations don't really affect the rest of us when they're disastrous, and they're just downplaying the effects on the rest of us so they get to do it again. So the episode shows how a perceived crisis can be the subject of intense public outcry and moral panic, even when people do not understand what has happened. It shows how the narrative told to the public can easily diverge from the truth. The real reasons behind the bubble are complex. Yeah, everything's really complex, and as complex as things are, there's still a lot of simplicity to it, as long as you're not going to dismiss that. So the South Sea Company, which gave its name to the event, helped the government manage its debt and also traded enslaved Africans to the Spanish colonies of the Americas. The government struggled to pay holders of its debt on time, and investors had difficulty selling on their debt to others due to legal difficulties. So debt holders were encouraged to hand their debt instruments to the South Sea Company in exchange for shares. The company would collect an annual interest payment from the government, instead of the government paying out interest to a large number of debt holders. The company would then pass on the interest payment in the form of dividends, along with profits from its trading arm. Shareholders could easily sell on their shares or simply collect dividends. So as complicated as that is complex, highly complex, you'll never understand the financial magic of the wizardry of these investors, the debt holders. No, it's not that hard, okay? The slavers were the ones who held the debt of the government, and by doing so, they had influence over government policy. Okay, simple. The debt management and slaving aspects of the company's history have often been misunderstood or downplayed. Older accounts state that the company did not actually trade at all. It did. The South Sea Company shipped thousands of people across the Atlantic as slaves, working with an established slave trading company called the Royal African Company. It also received convoy protection from the Royal Navy. Shareholders were interested in the South Sea Company because it was strongly backed by the British state. By the summer of 1720, South Sea Company shares became overvalued, and other companies also saw their share prices increase. So they want to tell you that the collapse of the slave trading company, strongly backed by the British state, was somehow not much of a dent in the wider economy. I don't know who the hell wrote that, but fuck you, okay? Anyway, so I show you that, and I talked about the solar activity of the U.S. Federal Reserve, and it's not, why am I talking about this? What are you talking about, Mike? So I say, I'll show you this one now. Why the U.S. Federal Reserve turned again to BlackRock for help. The exigencies of fighting COVID-19 trumped any potential conflicts of interest, okay? The marginal utility of value at play here, right, was overwhelmed by the extreme circumstances of the COVID pandemic, but otherwise, the marginal utility of value is what they're kind of working with in some sense. So this month, Wall Street watchers might feel as if they are living in Groundhog Day. Now, as in 2008, markets are melting down. Once again, the U.S. Federal Reserve is frantically innovating to stop a financial freeze. And as these wild policy experiments unfold, a familiar figure is also back in the frame. Larry Fink, chief executive of BlackRock, $7 trillion asset management behemoth. 12 not so long years ago, the Fed turned to BlackRock. 12 is 1 year more than 11. Just so you know, right? The Fed turned to BlackRock to manage the 3 maiden lane vehicles that it created to hold assets from the defunct insurer AIG and also Bear Stearns. On Tuesday, it again tapped BlackRock's financial market advisory consultancy arm again to run 3 vehicles the Fed will create to buy corporate debt from the primary and secondary markets, and also commercial mortgage-backed securities. So this incestuous relationship is very much the reason why people are talking about this 300-year old bubble from the South Sea Company is because BlackRock is the new South Sea Company, okay? They're the new slave traders that are backing the governments of the world, or at least the Western governments, okay? So is this replay a smart move by the Fed? The answer depends on if you have a wartime or peacetime perspective. In calm market times, as existed a month ago, remember that, Tuesday's announcements would look very odd. Never mind that the Fed has used BlackRock before or that Mr. Finks is fabulously well connected. What is more notable is that BlackRock received this mandate without a contest. Moreover, this asset management firm has such a humongous footprint that it will inevitably collide with those Fed vehicles. So that was exactly why it gets the mandate without a contest, because it dominates the market. And so the Fed is not really making the decision. BlackRock is, because BlackRock's got the Fed by the balls. So if or when we return to a point of normality, U.S. regulators will then need to ask another question. Why did they let the asset management world become so concentrated that the ever-present Mr. Fink reigns supreme? Because it's all by design. It's not an accident, right? So let's see how you guys are doing. Welcome, KYE, Kiliora Gregor. Thanks for being here. I know I'm kind of maybe getting a little bit confused here, disorganized, but let's just try and keep rolling here. I wanted to show you this 200 years of interest rates in the U.S. And just to kind of bolster my claim that the solar activity does have a bit of a impact, undeniably. So this 1981 crack up boom, whatever you want to call it, in the interest rate seems very significant. It's way before my time, so I don't really know much about it, but I did want to quickly just double check for the purposes of my little theory here. Was there solar activity at this time? And I found it very interesting to take note that at that very same time in that spike in that graph, 1981, a total solar eclipse occurred at the moon's ascending node on July 31st, 1981. It was the 20th eclipse of the 145th Saros cycle, which began with a partial eclipse on January 4th, 1639, and will conclude with a partial eclipse April 3009. But what's interesting, the reason why I highlighted that was we're talking about 1720. I know I'm jumping all over the map here, but try and stick with me. Whatever, 1700s, this Jevons guy is talking about these economic things starting from 1720 onwards. There's this thing called the Grand Maunder Minimum that started like 1645 and went till 1715. So this eclipse, or whatever, that occurred on July 1981 is part of a cycle that started just before the beginning of the Grand Maunder Minimum, and that Grand Maunder Minimum ended just before the 1720 economic crises of the South Sea Company there. And that was the first beginning of the cycle of the new El Nino cycle adjusted after the Grand Maunder Minimum. And I learned that during the Grand Maunder Minimum, the El Nino cycle was not diminished, but it was cranked up because of the cold weather. So all of these things matter as far as recessions and climate change. And after the 1720, there's this English agricultural revolution, they call it, but was kicked off. And it has everything to do with like the things that you can do with agriculture during like a solar minimum compared to a solar maximum sort of thing. Has everything to do with like pressuring natural selection towards we have a problem we need to solve, and by solving that problem, it advances our technological discovery, right? So moving on here to kind of bolster a little bit. So 1981 was that solar eclipse and that interest rate thing. Here is those interest rates were triggered by this man here, Paul Volcker. Volcker's announcement of anti-inflation measures in October 1979. Fed Chairman Paul Volcker announced new measures aimed at reining in inflation, sound familiar to what we're going on today, that had afflicted the U.S. economy for several years. Okay, so going back to this graph so that we can kind of understand, 1979, it's probably this little peak down here. He implements these policies to get the interest rate up to here, and he's doing it at the beginning of 1979 was the beginning of a solar maximum for something like that, from what I remember. I don't have the receipt there, but because I got too many tabs or whatever, but I'm just telling you that their decisions regarding the interest rate are aligning with this Jevons theory here about the sunspots and the solar cycles and all this fun stuff. That's kind of complicated and difficult to explain. So another thing, though, for interest, I started off by talking about Canada and that 22-year rate. I'll share you this one, and I'll show you Bank of Canada holds interest rate, continues quantitative tightening. The Bank of Canada's interest rate is completely tied to the United States interest rate of the Fed. And so sometimes they'll diverge a little bit here, and then they'll make a big deal about it. But it's never going to diverge permanently until Canadian foreign policy diverges from Americans, which isn't going to happen. So I've been talking a lot here. I'm going to take a sip, see what you guys had to say. Watch a major market crisis happen after the eclipse next Tuesday. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting into next here. And this is a little bit tricky to predict, of course. I think that's exactly what I'm saying is going to happen. There's the eclipse will bring what do you call it? It'll be an economic boon to those places where the path of totality is. It will cross. So you guys can see this. The eclipse could bring 1.5 billion into states on the path of totality. The total solar eclipse passing through parts of the U.S. stands to have a major economic impact on cities across the country as stargazers flock to the path of totality. So if you remember that video I showed at the beginning with the Muslims, they're actually talking. There was a solar eclipse was when I guess Muhammad spoke to, or Gabriel, the angel, spoke to him, and that's how he wrote his stuff or whatever. I don't really know. I don't follow that stuff, but I'm just saying that those are the ones who really, like, people who religious believers and stuff are going to be part of the people in these flocks of stargazers. So all of their activity and their beliefs, whatever, have an effect on the economy, of course, right? Like the Muslim pilgrimage, the Hajj. So factors including the date of the eclipse and the number of states in the path of totality means that millions of people will have the opportunity to view the event, and that cities hosting them could see a combined 1.5 billion injected into their states' economies. But this is where I'm staying, because all these other indicators demonstrate that. Let me see if I go back to this other. I think that original. I meant to maybe show you a couple other graphs. Did I skip? Yeah, there's more to show you actually from that first article. So I showed you this revolutions chart. I meant to show you some of these graphs too, right here, okay? Solar cycle and OECD CLI. I forget exactly what that stands for, but all four maximums of solar activity overlapped closely with troughs in the OECD business conditions. Okay. This one, solar cycle and U.S. unemployment, 1948 to 2014. All six solar maximums overlapped with minimums of the U.S. unemployment rate, followed by its sharp increase. Okay. Solar cycle and G7 unemployment, all five solar maximums overlapped with minimums of unemployment rate in G7 countries, followed by its sharp increase. So it seems like the solar maximum overlaps with a minimum of unemployment. So at the solar maximum, the majority of us are employed, followed by a sharp increase in unemployment. So the solar maximum, guess what? Maybe you're going to be out of a job. Is that how to read that? I don't know. I'm just pointing it out to you. So you see how that maybe changes things as far as what decision you want to make, as far as you want to try and stay in your job or look for a new job or whatever, right? So yeah, that's right. Sorry, I butchered that explanation. Muhammad from receive the revelation from the angel Gabriel. Those revelations is the Quran. Yeah, that's exactly it. And that comes from a total solar eclipse, like one we're about to have on April 8th. That's all I'm trying to say about that. So there's going to be this economic boost, followed by a roller coaster, is my guess. Okay. And the other thing also with the state of the race with Joe Biden and all that, I want to share you this funny little tidbit. The Celestial Empire, solar eclipses political legitimacy and economic performance in historical China. We explored a unique historical experiment to study how changes in political legitimacy affect economic performance. In historical China, solar eclipses were interpreted as heaven's wrath incurred by wrongdoings of the ruling class, signaling a decline in the incumbent's legitimacy. Using an original dataset covering over 2,000 years, we document that when total solar eclipses occurred, climate shocks had a greater negative impact on economic performance. The key mechanism appears to be that total eclipses significantly intensify the effect of climate shocks on civil conflict. Our findings thus highlight the importance of political legitimacy during periods of economic downturn. So that's, I feel, very interesting as far as all of this concern about who's going to win, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. I feel like it's like written in the stars. Like Joe Biden is doomed, and they just have these irrational reasons and rational reasons that make it something of an inevitable thing to occur. So, and then just to talk about that very quickly, this one, presidents in the economy. The U.S. economy has performed better when the president of the United States is a Democrat rather than a Republican. Although almost regardless of how one measures performance, for many measures, including real GDP growth, on which we concentrate, the performance gap is both large and statistically significant, despite the fact that post-war history includes only 16 presidential terms. Basically, what that's saying is the Democrats seem to be the ones who are the flip-flop of the duopoly seems designed so that the Democrats are in power during a bull market or whatever, during an economic boom, and then the Republicans are put in power to deal with the bust and the recession. And then people will play the stupid game, and then they'll say, that's because the Democrats are clearly better at economics, bro. And it's actually that's because the Democrats they're playing us or whatever, and they're meant to be allowed to have these wasteful spending policies and whatever you call them. They'll work with big budget deficits on purpose, right? Knowing that they can get away with that during the booming cycle, intending for the Republicans to take over, to have the opposite tactics of whatever you call them, austerity measures, right? That are best applied in their mind in this recession phase. So be aware that they are aware of these cycles, making use of them, and telling you that it's pseudoscience. Okay, so I'll share this. Let me scroll up to the top just to show you. Do Republican presidents oversee recessions and Dems oversee recoveries? Real GDP growth, the measure of economic activity in the U.S., averaged 3.3% during the 64 years and 64 presidential terms, going back to the mid-1940s. According to a 2013 research paper by professors of economics Alan Blinder and Mark Watson at Princeton University. With a Republican in the White House, though, the economy's growth slowed to 2.54% of the economists found. With a Democrat in office, growth jumped to 4.35% on average. A variety of other economic indicators, such as per capita GDP, stock market returns, real wages, and the change in the unemployment rate, are also more robust with a Democratic president, the economists found. Unemployment fell by 0.8 percentage points with a Democratic president on average, while it rose 1.1 percent points with a Republican, according to Blinder and Watson. What does that mean? If Donald Trump gets elected, which it seems like pretty inevitable, that we know that it's going to be bad for the workers, right? Higher unemployment, lower wages, or wage stagnation, okay? It's already written in the stars, you might say. So does it say our rating? Is that true? That's a fact check, and their rating is true, okay? So that's what I'm saying. I think I've been going on and on. I'll share you this little tidbit as another reinforcement that I was tweeted out March 27th, so last week. What is the average life cycle of the average building? Maybe you can't see that. Let me make it a bit bigger. Just a little bit more interesting cycle analysis. The average life cycle of a building between 50 and 63 years. How old is the average building? The average age of commercial buildings in the United States is approximately 53 years, right in the middle, okay? The Kondratiev cycle is a concept introduced by Nikolai Kondratiev. It describes long-term economic cycles that alternate between periods of high and low growth rates. These waves last approximately 40 to 60 years and are characterized by technological innovation and evolution. What do we have? A housing crisis. You know what I mean? So we got recession coming on. We got crumbling buildings. Things do fit more than we maybe want to admit. So as Marxists, it might help us to, considering this is like a bit of a neoclassical economist's idea about these cycles, maybe this has some relevance that will help us. It doesn't mean that labor theory of value is useless at all, right? I'm just saying that it helps us modulate our it helps modern Marxists figure out what we have to add to the classical Marxist theories, right? So all right, I've been going on for quite some time. Let me see if there's anything else I missed. I think I actually hit all my tabs, even though I've got all of this. I had a whole bunch of stuff to go through today, so yeah, thanks for being here, guys. We'll see if Abby's feeling any better for next week. Hopefully she'll be back. I won't be doing so many shows by myself, but I'll do what I have to, so... shout out to RBN, Nick and CJ and Sabby and JB. Please keep watching all their shows. They're doing great work. Do Dissidents, Gray Zone, Midwestern Marks. Check them out. Charlie Brown, Social Contract, Tuesdays at 1, and Beyond the Arc, Sunday at 9. So, yep. Thanks, guys. So if you have any comments, I'll be playing the outro music now, and don't have any videos for you. I was maybe going to try and play a bit more of that video, but they killed the stream. So hopefully this information is of use to you guys. Yeah, don't forget Rome. How do I forget Rome? The chief, the leader of the bunch, the CEO, right? Thank you, Rome, for all that you do. Hopefully, if you're in Detroit one day and I can get a passport and I can actually meet with you and work with you in person, that would be something that would really mean something to me. So, anyways, have a good night, you guys. See you next time. And peace.